So thank you all for coming. This meeting is being recorded. You are probably going to get a message across your screen where you'll opt in for that. My name is Claudia Kane. I'm from Scoville Memorial Library in Salisbury. And tonight's program is a joint effort of the library, Noble Horizons, the Salisbury Association Historical Society. And this is the first of 3 sessions on slavery in the Northwest Corner. If you have registered for this session, you are going to be automatically registered for the succeeding 2 sessions. And again, all of these will be recorded. It will be on the Scoville Library YouTube channel. And again, we are going to monitor the muting situation. So everybody should stay muted, and we may have to jump in and do that for you. But we're really happy tonight to have students from the Salisbury School who have been doing exploring slavery and African-American history in our area and throughout New England for a number of years. So tonight we have 2 students who are going to be presenting this session, and there will be different students for the succeeding sessions. But some of the topics that they have covered in the past or are working on now and will be covering in the near future there's one that's ongoing now that concerns Troutbeck in Amenia, New York, and that is a collaboration with other public schools and private schools. And I think that's going to be part of a conference that's going to be held in April, so that's very exciting. They've also done research on vigilante abolitionism, including the Reverend John Newton Mars, who is the father of Joseph and James, who you'll be hearing about later on. The history of Black athletes, Black lacrosse, the Amistad Revolt, Black comics, and local Hispanic history. So tonight we have from the Salisbury School, we have Jack Norris, who is a senior from Cos Cob, Connecticut, and we have Duncan Ryder, who is a junior from Essex, Connecticut. And tonight's first session is going to be an exploration of slavery in Connecticut. And they're going to be using the themes of dehumanization, treatment of the enslaved, and paternalism with a focus on the economics of slavery. The second week will focus on Joseph Mars, who is the brother of James Mars. And there was a presentation on James, I believe, last year via Noble Horizons that's probably available on their website. And James Mars was born into slavery in Canaan and later fled to Norfolk, where he became a free man, an activist, and an author. And that session will focus on their investigation of Joseph Mars, who may have been enslaved in Salisbury. And the final week, they'll bring you into the process of the research, documenting enslaved people through primary sources such as property, church, vital records, accounts, and census data. And they'll also discuss memorializing the life of Joseph Mars with a witness stone. So I'm going to turn it over to Jack and Duncan. I'm going to vanish from the screen and they will take over and share what they've learned with you. So I hope you enjoy the session. We are going to be handling questions and answers in the chat. So if you have a question, if you would put it in there and we'll get to those at the end of the presentation. So again, thank you for coming and I hope you enjoy. So I'm turning it over to Jack and Duncan.
Good evening, everyone. As I previously mentioned, my name is Duncan and that's Jack, and we had our presentation on slavery in the Northwest Corner and the economic side to it.
You can nibble on it as you can.
So there are 5 main themes of slavery: dehumanization, treatment of enslaved, paternalism, the economics of slavery, and agency and resistance. Although, as it was stated earlier, that we will be focusing on the economics of slavery tonight, I want you to keep in mind all 5 of these themes because these were extremely impactful and affected the lives of many people throughout the North and South.
No, the guys
So I'll define a couple of these for you right now. So dehumanization throughout the duration of slavery. The enslaved were stripped of human rights to the point where all positive human rights were taken away and were considered property rather than people.
That's a lot. It's the times it goes.
Okay.
Treatment of the enslaved people were treated like animals and were regularly beaten and were eating scraps of food. They would typically be living in attics or basements of slave owners. Northern slavery was much different than Southern slavery, though, because slaves would at least be living inside the house of Northerners versus throughout the South, where they're often found living in barns and more work camp environments. Paternalism was not good at all. It was very painful for many people, as masters took interests of the lives of their slaves and took away all of their rights for the most part. Paternalism caused slave owners to call these men boys and strip them such a simple rights, even like learning to read. The economics of slavery had an effect worldwide, with trade running through several continents. The transaction of slaves was an extremely profitable market. Also, this was essential to how the Northern economy ran. The enslaved agency and resistance. The enslaved did not give easily into slavery and were not just sitting back and letting it happen. Many enslaved would try to fight the system of slavery by escaping, sabotaging masters and employees of plantations, and would rebel. This would allow them opportunities to potentially be able to gain more rights, such as learning just personal life skills, and truly expose people to the horror of slavery.
Our next slide is early slavery in Salisbury. Although it's believed that slavery was non-existent in the North, enslavement was very much a part of the past for the North. On the eve of Revolution, Connecticut had the largest enslaved population in New England. The 1774 colonial consensus lists 44 Black residents in Salisbury. The 1782 U.S. Consensus lists there was 35 Black residents. They would work in the fields, chop wood, tend to animals, and help keep the house clean. Enslaving someone was something of a status symbol. Many clergymen, lawyers, and other prominent families kept Black people captive. And so on the screen now are the U.S. Census lists, and I think Mr. McCrisky is going to make them a little bit bigger here. While Mr. McCrisky is doing that, the U.S. Census lists were really just lists that showed a certain amount of like groups of people that were in different parts of like the country, or in this case, it was the Connecticut and some of the towns in Connecticut. And I think he is pulling it up right now. In just one moment as the screen loads.
Were you able to see either one of those yet or no? Duncan, could you see either one of those censuses yet?
Yeah, we could see them, but they were very small. So it's kind of, we could see them on the screen, but it was hard to.
Okay. Here's the 1774 census. You can see where we highlighted Salisbury, and they categorized everyone there. And at the last column says total Black. So this is 1774. There were 44 Black residents of Salisbury, some free, but most enslaved. And then this is the 1784 census. If you scroll down here, you can see Salisbury above Sharon, and you scroll over and there were 35 in the 1782 US census under the category of Blacks. And again, that is mostly enslaved, not necessarily all of them.
So
Okay, take it away.
So they are muted. There we go. No.
Oh, sorry. So next was complicity. And the definition of complicity is a state of being involved with others in a legal activity or wrongdoing. Textbooks have typically described the Northern economy as benevolent, and it was relying on free labor with a thrifty spirit. In reality, it was complicit in profit from the institution of slavery. The demand for materials like cotton from the South to aid industrial production and expansion was a leading factor in why the North was so complicit to this act. The book Complicity was written to expose the horrors of slavery, and that book is all the way to the right on the slide. And it was also to hold people accountable, especially the North. And we spent the first couple of months first couple of weeks, of class learning about and reading passages from this book that would help us understand a lot more about how the North was so complicit. And there were like chapters on a lot of different productions, I guess, of different things. Like there was ivory, was a big product of Ivoryton, Connecticut. So it just went through and showed how the North was very complicit in this act.
New England and Caribbean trade. In the Caribbean, sugar was considered a white gold and grown the most in the world through enslaved labor. Within the Caribbean, there are over 4 million enslaved, but the Caribbean needed a food supplier, so they relied on New England to be the breadbasket of the Caribbean. Therefore, many large slave plantations would buy codfish to feed their slaves and beaver pelts to dress them as well. Another large export was yellow onion grown in Farmington, Connecticut, because they didn't spoil easily. In return, New England received 3.5 million gallons of molasses, which they used to distill rum. Between Massachusetts and Rhode Island, there were 70 distilleries and 2.8 million gallons of rum, which were distributed from Newfoundland and throughout the Deep South. Also, New England rum was distributed by ship and rivaled the prices of the West Indies, and had the largest shipping fleet on the Atlantic at the time at a staggering 70 boats. New England textiles. Throughout New England, there were 472 cotton mills. In this industry, textiles were produced through millions of pounds of cotton picked by mistreated enslaved people of the South. In 1860, 75% of the nation's cotton was produced from New England textile companies, a staggering 850 million yards of cloth. Cotton fueled the New England economy and contributed to the growth of cities like Lowell and Lawrence, Massachusetts. A large form of profit for these cities was slave clothing, which was an extremely thin layer of cotton and was sold to plantations throughout the South that dressed each and every slave. Also, when looking for a US history textbook, there is not any correlation between these industrial cities of the North and slavery in the South.
Salisbury iron industry. For centuries, the iron industry of Salisbury was renowned with over 43 blast furnaces that were run. These blast furnaces were produced high quality pig iron that would be shipped all over the world to be made into different material. A strong majority of these furnaces were owned by the Barnum Richardson and Company, who also created high quality steel wheels that would be put on a transportation such as railroad cars. A client of this company was the Alabama and Tennessee Railroad Company, who shipped enslaved people, tools, resources throughout the South. And that last slide was just a picture of the sources that we used. And I think now Mr. McCrisky is going to pull up our infographic that we made about some of the blast furnaces in Connecticut that we found. in just one moment.
And overall, the local connection from Salisbury to slavery throughout the South.
That's me.
Okay, so the connection between pig iron to slavery, it all starts up at the Beckley Furnace in Salisbury, Connecticut, as they were a leading contributor in the production of pig iron in Salisbury, and they produced some of the world's most renowned pig iron. And this was shipped throughout the United States and part of the Barnum and Richardson Company. The Barnum and Richardson Company was a company that owned most of the blast furnaces across Connecticut. And this company sold pig iron to most of the clients throughout the nation, such as Ensign Manufacturing Company. This company was the company that produced steel wheels for train cars. And a key contributor to the connection to the South is a man named Samuel Griswold. Samuel Griswold was a Whig from Clinton, Connecticut, who migrated to the South. Since being from Connecticut, he was extremely familiar with the Salisbury pig iron industry, as it was a booming business and the highest quality overall. So Sam ended up meeting a man, Daniel Pratt, in Macon, Georgia, 10 miles west of what is now Griswoldsville. Daniel Pratt was a Whig from New Hampshire who migrated down to the South in an attempt to expand his cotton gin company that he was making. This was a world-renowned cotton gin that ended up being one of the top sold types of cotton gins throughout the world, actually. And while he was down there, he connected Samuel Griswold, who I just explained before, to Salisbury Steel. And Samuel Griswold was a part owner of the Alabama and Tennessee Railroad Company. And they needed a new wheel supplier. So he was able to connect that to the company and supply the whole South with a transportation and way to ship materials throughout the South.
In 1849, Griswoldville, Georgia was founded by Samuel Griswold, and this was the place where Griswold and Pratt developed, well, they didn't create, but they helped develop their world famous cotton gin. And this became the original location of the Pratt cotton gins. The Pratt created his cotton gin in a factory in 1838. He had enslaved workers perform the labor while he made a large profit. With the money he generated, he purchased a part of the Alabama and Tennessee Railroad Company to ship his cotton gins around the company or around the country more effectively. And the Alabama and Tennessee Railroad Company was essentially a way to ship enslaved people, tools, and resources effectively throughout the South. In 1854, Barnum, Richardson and Company became a client of the Alabama and Tennessee Railroad Company and supplied steel wheels for their train cars. And here are all our references that we used to find our information.
Thank you guys for listening to our presentation.
So now we could open it up for any questions.
Yeah, so if you have any questions, if you just want to put them in the chat and we will monitor that, and Jack and Duncan will do their best to answer them for you. So I thank you guys very much. I think this was a really interesting presentation, and I think it's something that we in New England and Salisbury in this area somehow believe that we weren't part of we weren't part of slavery in this country. And so I think it's great that a lot of this is coming to light, and I really applaud you and the school for digging into this and, you know, doing these presentations for the community. I think it's really, really fabulous. So, and I guess my question is, what inspired you to do this? Did Mr. McCrisky strong arm you, or did you just come in and ask him if you could investigate some things that you'd heard about?
Well, actually, funny story. I joined the class. Mr. McCrisky's last a couple days late, so I was a little behind on everything. So when we were like picking out projects, I didn't really have an idea of what I wanted to do. But he was like listing out ideas on the board one day, and I didn't really realize how big of a pig iron exportation that Salisbury had. So it kind of interested me because I didn't know that it was so like famous and world renowned. And I think he mentioned something about how the cannonballs in the Revolutionary War were actually made from Salisbury pig iron. So to me, that was just really cool. And that's what made me want to do it, because I just want to explore more what it was about.
To add on to Duncan, so Mr. McCrisky even brought up that there is a connection between Alabama and Salisbury steel, and that just fueled an interest in me and really inspired me at least to explore like what was in between that, because there was definitely a lot in between it and it was unknown, and I thought it would be super awesome to like be able to learn about honestly what made Salisbury so profitable and how like that they were like still part of slavery after it was abolished in the North.
So, well, that's great. And I think that, you know, curiosity is always, in my opinion, going to serve everybody well, you know, while you're a student and going forward. So you're getting a lot of accolades in the chat. You know, great job, excellent presentation. Some of the questions are, what surprised you about your research?
Something that surprised me was a little bit more of a personal connection. And I live in Essex, Connecticut, which is the town, or it's very close to Clinton, Connecticut. And I actually found out that Samuel Griswold, the man that one of the men that we studied, actually has relations to the Griswold Inn, which is actually a place where I work. So I just thought that was very cool, and it was just neat finding connection.
Yeah, so is it going to inspire you to explore slavery connections in your hometowns? I mean, you've talked a little bit about it, being from Essex, and certainly the Griswold Inn is a prominent feature of that town.
Yes, I mean, I definitely think I will more, because I don't know if any of you have actually been to the Griswold Inn, but inside there's just so much history and a lot of different cool artifacts. So I think probably the next time I work, or the next time I go in there to eat something, I'll definitely take a more of a deeper look into what some of the stuff is around there. And I mean, the place is just rich with history, so it'd be a very cool thing to check it out.
Yeah, and let's see.
Claudia, could you spotlight Clarence as well? Bring him in. Clarence is a two-year veteran of this course, and he could probably answer some of these questions. Jack and Duncan, another one was, what happened? Did you research at all what happened to the companies or the men after the Civil War, after the 13th Amendment, after abolitionism?
I can cover this a bit. So at least what we noticed through our research is, as we did research on each of these men, it brought like lots of money and prominence to their family throughout the South. We mentioned this in our presentation, but Daniel Pratt, there is a town in Alabama actually named after him now called Prattsville, Alabama. So like these families are very prominent throughout the South nowadays. And even the Griswolds are still extremely involved up in the Northeast. So it affected them in positive ways. And like also I found it very interesting that two Whigs were men running this whole connection to slavery throughout the South to fuel the New England economy partially.
Thanks, Jack. Do you know what role the enslaved in Salisbury played in working in or for the pig iron industry?
So through our research, we actually found a couple different varying like sources. I think, and one source we found that they were actually helping, not at the Beckley Furnace. We actually have the president of the Beckley Furnace said that there was never any enslaved people that worked there, but we have found at a couple different iron furnaces or blast furnaces, excuse me. There were enslaved people working, but we also found that they were just and on another source that they were just working in the fields or in the house and not anywhere near the blast furnaces. So at the moment, we're a little split between sources, but I think we're still trying to figure out and see what we can find there.
And sort of related to that, there's another question about the lives of the slaves that you found in the census. Were they generally like one or two per household, or did you have households that maybe had, you know, a greater slave population?
Well, from what we found, it was one or two normally per house, because I think that was more prominent in the north. It wasn't like a whole bunch of slaves like that, or enslaved people, excuse me, like down in the south. In the north, it was more one or two enslaved people that would help around the house. But we haven't really found anything specific to the Salisbury area, but that's what we have found so far. So.
And I think Ronan chimed in that there was one household that had 7 slaves. Is that right?
Yeah, Adonijah Strong from Town Hill. He was the largest, and there were 7. We couldn't tell in the same house, or he enslaved them in different properties. Clarence, there's one that you might be able to handle. What other research projects are you guys doing this year?
Yeah, so there's a whole bunch of stuff. We have there's almost 30 like Microsoft Teams channels that we have. Just a few of them, I guess, are, we're working on Amy Spingarn Metal. We're putting together
they might not know who the Spingarns are. Give them a quick bio.
Oh, wait, sorry.
Can you hear me? Who are the Spingarns, Clarence?
Yeah, they were just this family who, and they have like the Spingarn Metal, and it started to sort of highlight like the good that Black people were doing, because at the time there wasn't really anything that did. So yeah, we're like doing projects on that. We're putting together a big event in late April, and we need advertisements for that, sponsorships. There's a food channel for that event. We made a class website. Yeah, there's just, there's Black lacrosse, Black athletes, all sorts of stuff that we're doing.
Great. And there are a couple of questions concerning children, enslaved children. Do you know if there were any? And if so, do you know if they went to local schools, or how education might have been handled for enslaved children?
Actually, I think it was the 17, hold on one second, I'm sorry. I have it right next to me. It looks like the 1784 consensus says that there was children. Unfortunately, I can't see the exact number at the moment, but I think it was a smaller population. I think it was more adults, but we could not find a lot about the education system or like how their education played a role. So I think we'll probably take a deeper dive in the next trimester and try and see if education had a part in their lives or not. So.
Great. Whoops. Oh, here we go.
So this column here, Black males under 20, Black females under 20, Black males above 20, Black males under 20. So if you scroll down to this line, there were 5 males under 20, 6 women, 6 girls, Black girls in the town.
And so,
and I can actually speak to a little bit about the education piece. They weren't educated. As a matter of fact, James Mars, who was a man that we looked at last year, he led like a big push. He helped start one of the first schools for Black children in Hartford. But at the same time that was going on, a woman named Prudence Crandall in Canterbury, Connecticut, had her schoolhouse burned down by crowds that didn't want Black children to be educated.
And I have a question about the ratio of enslaved people in Salisbury compared to the general population. Do you know?
It was low. It was probably 5% or under.
Okay. And there are some other questions about, was there any significance of that Griswold and Pratt were both Whigs?
Yeah, there is extreme significance to that actually, because the Whigs were more of a Northeastern party, and mostly Whigs were against abolishing slavery in general across the whole nation, and were like considered be extremely against it and kind of be more with the North's terms, even though they kind of figured that it would fuel the economy of the South and North a lot.
And there's another question about, is there a specific place where the slave trade in Connecticut was more prominent? Did the owners travel to the South, to New York, to Rhode Island?
Well, I think another group is actually doing a project on this called the Amistad, and the slave trade, I think, was I don't know. I mean, the Connecticut River clearly played a big role in that, and I think there was a slave trading. I don't know if it's called post. I'm not sure, but location in Middletown, and that's where I think that was one of the like hubs, I guess you could say, where slaves are being, or enslaved people are being traded. Sorry.
Hey, will you talk a little bit why it's important that we use enslave rather than slave, and enslaver and captor rather than master? Any one of you guys?
It's very important that we use the term enslaved rather than slaves, because enslaved shows that they were like held against their will as slaves, versus like slaves just being like the main thing they were just slaves. But there are more to these people than that. These enslaved people were like amazing people, like such as Webb du Bois at some point. And some of these people were able to be like true pioneers and pushing to end slavery throughout the North and South.
That's a very good point. And there's another question about, and I think this probably has to do with the census, but if it differentiates between free Black people and enslaved.
I think it's fairly accurate in saying that they were enslaved people. I think at this time it was majority of them were enslaved people. I'm not exactly sure, but I think based off the census, it did say enslaved people. So I think that is the most accurate information that we can get.
I hate to correct you, buddy. Only because I just looked at it. One of them calls them Negro, and the other one calls them Black, and it doesn't differentiate. But Clarence, will you talk about Catherine Overton and the Caesar family a little bit? It's that might help answer that question.
I'm sorry, I'm like in the library. I couldn't get a study room.
All right. Do you want to handle it, or is it too loud?
Yeah, can you handle this one?
Yeah. So I put in the chat last year when we met with Jean McMillan in the very start of the year, she told me about a woman who knew a lot about this history, but she did not come from an enslaved family. Her family was a free Black family in this area, and it was the Caesar family. Timothy Caesar fought in the Revolutionary War, just like James Mars' father, Jupiter. And it may be him, but definitely his son, Titus, bought land up in Salisbury Town Hill, and then later in Sharon along Route 7. And if you look in the chat, I posted a documentary called Coloring Our Past, which has inspired the name of this course this year when the students said it really isn't all about slavery. And so we partnered with Catherine Overton, who's a 5th generation relative of Timothy Caesar, to tell this story. And it's an investment. It's 13 plus minutes, but it is really well done, and it's actually been nominated and won awards in some film festivals, including the Louisville Film Festival. So that was a free family.
And I know that the library, maybe 2 years ago, I think we had a program on the Caesar family, and I'm embarrassed to say I don't know if it's on our YouTube channel. I hope it is.
So actually, if you're interested in that, I'll post another link. Well, actually, you know what? We have a YouTube channel, and all the students' work. Another question was, are we memorializing this at all? And the answer is yes, we are. And I'll throw this in the chat as well. That's our YouTube channel, and it was we did a show with Noble Horizons last year, where we screened the movie, and our very own Caleb May, local Caleb May, was the director, and he fielded questions, and there are a lot of Caesar family descendants on that, and it was a very powerful and emotional night, and one of the people there cried, and I'm not going to admit publicly that it was me.
And that's on the Salisbury School YouTube channel?
I just posted the link to our YouTube channel overall, and it's just for this class. We also have an Instagram account and our Twitter account that boys will post their work on there as well. I can't remember what the names of them are, but these guys could tell you. What's our, and you want, maybe type them in the chat too.
Okay. And let's see, there's another question about the impact was on the price of cotton and steel after slavery was abolished.
So at least in the steel industry, the Salisbury steel industry in general, that slowly died down as there were bigger cities that started to produce steel, such as Pittsburgh and others. Yeah, just Pittsburgh as a main front, and then eventually overseas in China and all of that stuff. But we're not exactly sure what it is with cotton, but
you know, one of the reasons why we wanted to do this with you all, and we're so thrilled at the turnout, is we're all learning, right? I mean, this is all a journey. I'm a history teacher. I've been doing this for 20 plus years up here in Salisbury. I got my master's from Southern Connecticut State University, and I am a lifelong nutmegger, and I didn't know there was slavery in Connecticut until 3 years ago. So this has all been like a giant learning project, and I'm not teaching this. Like these, as you could tell, like these, I'm learning from these guys. They did all this work, and I just learned from them, and verified and was just constantly impressed by them. So that's a great question, and I encourage you for week 3. We really want this to be kind of a grassroots community investigation. So let's all take a look at that question. Like, the steel industry died out because Jack said there was new processes and bigger cities, and that's true. Cotton, I don't know the answer. It's a great question.
And let's see, do we know where the Mars family are buried, if they're in local cemeteries or?
Jupiter, the Revolutionary War veteran, and James and Fanny, Jupiter's wife, James's mom, they're buried in the Norfolk Cemetery. And you can go see it, and it's marked, and it's a spot on the Freedom Trail, the Connecticut Freedom Trail. Titus Caesar, who I referenced earlier, he's buried in the Hotchkiss Cemetery, the Town Hill Cemetery there on the campus. And Catherine tells a story in that Zoom of going up there and hunting the overgrown part, and like peeling back and scraping away the tombstone, and seeing her ancestor's name, and like just got down on her knees crying. So they're out there for sure. But and then George Caesar's in the Sharon Green. There's a tombstone there for him. But there's still a lot of souls to be found for sure, including Joseph Mars, who you'll hear about next week.
Okay, and somebody has said their sister Charlotte Mars is buried in Salisbury.
Charlotte Mars is a fascinating story. So there were 2 sisters. One was, and the reason I'm doing this one is because this was last year's project. These guys weren't on it. but there were two sisters. One was Betsy Mars, Elizabeth Mars. She became a missionary to Liberia, and a very, like, she was there for 20 plus years. And as a matter of fact, when she died, they memorialized her grave with a stone that you can still see today. Charlotte, I know she's buried in Salisbury Cemetery. I don't know where. That's all we know. But she's also a fascinating story. She ends up working for the Knight family at the Salisbury School for Imbeciles. She lived on that property and helped. So all these families are remarkable. And we'll talk about John Newton Mars later. And just as a teaser, we believe John Newton Mars was the man who radicalized John Brown, who was from Torrington, Connecticut. And John Newton Mars was born 10 miles from him. So stay tuned for more on that one.
Okay, well, I'm not, okay. And then this same woman said that Charlotte was a free slave.
Charlotte was born after Jupiter and Fanny were freed. So she was never enslaved. So okay. Joseph, James, and Elizabeth were born into slavery. And then after Jupiter and Fanny gained their freedom, John Newton Mars and Charlotte were born. So you're correct. She was never enslaved.
Okay, so I'm not sure if we have any more questions, but again, compliments to you guys and to Ronan McCrisky. There's just been an amazing amount of support and gratitude for the research that you've done and how you've presented it. And I think we're all happy that this is just going to be the first of 3. I don't believe that it's going to be the same students next time, but next time is going to focus more on the Mars family. And again, if you're registered for this, you're automatically registered for the next 2 sessions. So I think if we don't have, there is somebody still coming in, but I'm not going to admit him because I think we're at the end here. But I just want to thank everybody for coming and thank you guys for all the research that you did and for how you presented it. And I think it was really fascinating and valuable to all of us. So I hope you all have a good night and I hope we see you next Thursday at 7 o'clock when we will be going over the Mars family history and what additional research has been found.
Yeah, and that's a teaser too. There is a very powerful connection there as well. So one last thing, if you go to that YouTube channel, just to tidy up Clarence's answer on the Spingarn family, as he's in the library. The Spingarns owned the Troutbeck, and the Troutbeck was home to some really important events. And so you'll hear more about that as we go through this as well. But there is a trailer to the event that I could post in the chat. I don't know. What time does this end? So today, Claudia?
What?
What time is this end? This Zoom? Did you say 7:45?
We can end it whenever we want. I mean, it just kind of.
Okay, so let me play this just again as advertisement for an event that Clarence talked about coming up. Hold on one second.
Let me.
Give me one sec. Sorry.
Okay.
Helping people. So today we aspired to do the same by learning.
Can you guys hear that? See that?
U.S. history courses are typically told from a white perspective. This is especially true when it comes to Black history. The narrative goes, there was slavery, there was a civil war, there was Reconstruction. In time, pioneers like Rosa Parks and Martin Luther King Jr. helped make life better for Black people. And then Obama became president. This narrative, however, lacks depth and misses countless figures of importance. Only some Black names are mentioned in this telling. But where are the rest? Our goal is to change that, and we start in Amenia, New York. Throughout history, the luscious seclusion of Troutbeck Amenia in New York has provided the ideal safe place for people to congregate and to discuss important matters. For this reason, Troutbeck owner Joel Spingarn decided to host 2 pivotal meetings of the NAACP. These conferences provided inspiration for early civil rights leaders as they reflected on the past, noted the present, and planned for a better future for Black Americans. The great minds of African American activists like W.E.B. Du Bois, James Weldon Johnson, Juanita Jackson, Ralph Bunche, Abram Harris, A. Philip Randolph, and Warren Weston planned and emerged with specific guidance for shaping the association's programs. These people devoted their lives to helping people. So today we aspired to do the same by learning this history and educating the public to spread the knowledge of these untold, unknown, or forgotten facets of history to help allow more Americans to have windows and mirrors when they look to our past. The truth is that there isn't one American reality. America consists of many realities. At the first conference in August 1916, attendees gathered in several large canvas tents in the middle of a field at the Troutbeck. James Weldon Johnson and W.E.B. Du Bois even shared a tent. Organized by Spingarn to revitalize the flagging civil rights organization, the ambience in the Spingarn estate helped leaders plan the fight for civil rights. The NAACP leaders had hoped that the conferences in Armenia would offer specific guidance for the shaping of the association's programs and help energize the recruitment of a younger generation. The second conference gathered from August 18th to the 22nd in 1933, and again, it attracted approximately 60 people who gathered at the Troutbeck. This was a period of a series of relentless events since 1916, like the deaths during Red Summer, the Tulsa race riots, the disillusionment of World War I veterans, and the ongoing trauma of the Great Depression. The influence and the impact of the 1933 conference in Armenia would reverberate well beyond the year 1933 as it elicited a newfound unity of purpose that helped the NAACP become a more powerful nationwide organization. Many of the attendees would also play prominent roles in the more famous civil rights era of the 50s and 60s. 2 attendees helped arrange the 1963 March on Washington. Today, the Troutbeck Armenia in New York lies approximately 100 miles away from New York City in northern Dutchess County. The rolling hills, abundant forests, large open pastures, streams, and picturesque towns are prominent in Armenia. What is unknown about this sliver of New York State is the rich uncharted history. Our goal for the symposium is to bridge the gap between these hardly known historical events and to make these incredible stories known. We are beyond excited to show the deep history of people of color in our region through the projects on the multiple facets of the Troutbeck, the Harlem Renaissance, Black athletes, local Latinx history, witness stones, and John Newton Mars. The Troutbeck is teeming with important and relevant history, and we students are ready to share it with our larger community.
So stay tuned for more on that.
Okay, well, thank you very much. That is definitely a good teaser.
Oh, sorry, that's my YouTube going nuts.
Okay, so I hope that we see you all next Thursday at 7 o'clock, and we will learn more. And again, lots of compliments in the chat. So again, thank you very much and have a good night.